Recently, we've gotten some really surprising names finding themselves on the trade bait list in the NHL. If we take a look at the Daily Faceoff Top 20 trade bait list, JJ Peterka finds himself at the #1 spot across the league, while Marco Rossi finds himself at #3. Now, what's so surprising is these are incredibly hard pieces to replace. You look at JJ Peterka and Marco Rossi, both were 2020 draft picks and are only 23 years old, while already having some good NHL success under their belts. So with this news and with these surprising names on the board, I want to take a look at why moving either of these players would be a mistake for the Buffalo Sabres or Minnesota Wild. And although it may be out of their hands, it definitely feels like a move that will come back to bite them down the line. Starting with JJ Peterka, this guy is easily the biggest name on the trade boards as things stand right now, although that may change with Jason Robertson somehow finding himself in trade rumors recently. But if he isn't on the trade block for whatever reason, it's definitely JJ Peterka that would be the crown jewel. Now, this scenario is a little bit different than the one I'll touch on in a little bit with the Minnesota Wild, because it feels like this decision may be out of the Sabres' control. It sounds like, by all accounts, they want to hold on to JJ Peterka. Kevin Adams has talked before about how he has no wishes to move JJ Peterka. He wants him to stay on the team, although there are just some contract disputes, and honestly, it's probably more Peterka being unsure about what Buffalo is going to offer him long term. There's so much instability there that he's probably not willing to sign long term. There's been some discussion about him being a potential offer sheet candidate, but I don't really see this as being a risk because of the fact that Buffalo could just match whatever offer is given out to him. With the way offer sheets work, the original team has the chance to match the deal and therefore keep the player. So on one hand, there may be a team that offers Peterka a very solid contract, but Buffalo would probably sign it considering they don't want to move from him. And on the other hand, if JJ Peterka is worried about staying in Buffalo long term, he probably isn't the biggest fan of signing an offer sheet because he knows that could seal his future with the team. Last season with Buffalo, JJ Peterka had 27 goals and 41 assists for 68 points in 77 games. 41 assists and the 68 points were both career highs, and we need to remember that he was nearly a point per game player as a 23-year-old. This is a guy who could easily be a point per game player by as early as next season, and maybe he could have done it this year if Buffalo was a little bit better and could score a little bit more often. He was tied for second on the team in points behind just Tage Thompson, and that's a Buffalo forward core with some really talented players, even though obviously they're pretty disappointing in the end. You look at guys like Alex Tuch and even Rasmus Dahlin. I mean, he's a defenseman, of course, but he still puts up some pretty ridiculous point totals. So to be second in points on a team like that is not a small feat. It's definitely a different situation than if he was second in scoring on, say, the Chicago Blackhawks, or a team, where there's not a whole lot of offense being driven. But with Buffalo, he was one of the most important pieces on a team with lots of options. This year across the NHL, he was 6th in U24 scoring. Now, I'm not sure many people realize just how high that was. He was number 6. He was just ahead of players like Connor Bedard, Seth Jarvis, Logan Cooley, Lane Hudson, and obviously there's a bunch of other impressive names there as well. But it just goes to show how good JJ Peterka is and how devastating it would be for Buffalo if he was to move on. And outside of just the on-ice product, obviously your team is going to get worse without JJ Peterka. It would just send a terrible message to the rest of his teammates and the Sabres organization as a whole. It's already delicate to say the least, and if you have another talented player like JJ Peterka walk, it just sends the wrong message to your players after preaching that you want to be in the playoffs next year and you want to take that next step as an organization. You'd be losing a 23-year-old who was second on your team in points last year. It just sucks for Buffalo fans as well because they deserve better, and it just sucks to see all this talent leaving year after year after year. If Peterka does end up on a new team, no doubt in my mind, he becomes the next in the long list of players that go on to have success. Just look at guys like Reinhart, Allmark, Montour. There's just so many. I could go on forever. For any team getting him, you're getting a player that legitimately has 40-goal potential and is not even in his prime yet. He's just entering the best years of his career. And if you sign him to, say, a 7 or an 8-year deal, you're getting him until he's 30 or 31 years old. That deal will never look bad, unless obviously it's a huge overpay at the time. But I feel like a deal for JJ Peterka in any case would almost always be a win for the team, especially with the salary cap rising. But enough with JJ Peterka, let's move on to the second player I want to discuss in this video, and that's Marco Rossi. Now, the situation with Rossi is much more confusing than that with Peterka, because as I said, Peterka, it seems like it's his decision more than a Buffalo Sabres decision, whereas Marco Rossi, it sounds more like it is the Minnesota Wild that are ready to move on instead of the player. Now, why you would do that is beyond me, but let's go into a little bit more detail so you can come to a conclusion yourself. Now, the rumor is that Marco Rossi wants a contract close to Matt Boldy, who has a 7x7. Now, there's two sides to this. Is Marco Rossi Matt Boldy? No, he's not that good of a player, but to go hand in hand with that, Matt Boldy is underpaid to say the least. A 7x7 for Marco Rossi, in my opinion, is more than a fair deal. If you look at his last season, he had 60 points in 82 games, again as a 23-year-old just like Peterka. In the playoffs, he had 3 points in 6 games. Obviously, Minnesota didn't make it out of the first round, but that was more about who they were playing rather than just players underperforming. 3 points in 6 playoff games for your first run in the Stanley Cup playoffs is not bad at all. Just like Peterka, Marco Rossi was also second on his team in scoring, although that needs a bit of an asterisk to go with it because Kaprizov was hurt for a large stretch of the season and obviously would have overtaken him if he was around for even maybe 15 or 20 more games. But that too doesn't mean that Marco Rossi isn't worth being one of the highest paid players on the team, especially when you consider that by next season the salary cap is set to rise to $95.5 million, and from there it's only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. If we look at his contract by that year, it will be worth just 6.17% of the cap by the 2027-2028 season. Now that contract would be the equivalent of a $5.43 million deal this season. To say he's not worth that, especially as a 60-point player who's going to continue to get better through the prime years of his career, would just be a downright lie. If anything, I'd say a contract like that is a hometown discount. You also usually have to pay a premium for a centerman, and $5.4 million for Marco Rossi this season would have already been a good deal if you look at next season, where he should continue to progress as a player, given the fact that his first 2 seasons were pretty linear in terms of progression. This could look like an underpay by the 2nd or 3rd year of the contract, and you're laughing if you're Minnesota because you'd have 4 more years on this deal with the salary cap likely to rise even more from there. And that's why I think for the Minnesota Wild, it would be even a bigger mistake to move on from Marco Rossi at this point. Now, if you're another team looking to trade for him, go for it, absolutely, because it also sounds like the price that Minnesota is asking is very low. It was noted that Philadelphia turned down Minnesota's offer of Marco Rossi for one of their late first-round picks, and getting a 23-year-old 60-point center seems like a no-brainer of a deal. Now, the biggest thing with Rossi is, of course, his size, but I think the NHL has shown that size really doesn't matter when a player is as skilled as a guy like Marco Rossi. You look at someone like Jonathan Marchessault, who won a Conn Smythe a few years ago. He was an undersized player that found a way to make things work. Marco Rossi plays the type of hockey that succeeds in the playoffs. He's always going hard to the net. He's playing that dirty area type of game, but he also has skill to get around and obviously put up some pretty impressive point numbers. So why you would move on from a controlled asset like that is beyond me, unless of course you are just so obsessed with size. But you would just have to assume there's a GM out there that's going to look past that and look at the numbers even deeper and see that Marco Rossi is a star player in the making. His underlying numbers are great, his point production has been great so far, and he's young, asking for a fair contract. There's really no reason not to sign him, but of course some people see his height start with a 5 and then it's all over from there. Will we see either of these two players be moved? At this point, even though he's lower on the trade bait list, I think Marco Rossi is more likely, although I could see a world where both of these players are moved, especially if JJ Peterka tells the Sabres that he's not willing to sign an extension with them. But either way, team in control or team not in control, this would be a mistake for either organization. Buffalo, you get a bit of a pass because it may be out of your control completely, but Minnesota, there's just no excuse for this in my opinion. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you left it a like and subscribe to the channel. Also be sure to leave a comment down below, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.